Hello, guys and gals, and this is going to be a reading from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a novelization of the film that had like Kristen Swanson and other people in it. Anyways, also I believe this movie also had Pee Wee Herman in it. I mean Paul Rubens. Well, it's Paul Rubens, as a vampire. Anyways, this would have been the Chessboard Queen Part 2, but I still haven't gotten permission to actually post any more of that one. So I'm going to wait till I get permission and then pick that up from where I left off. So anyways, let's go over the copyright information here. Says trademark copyright 1992 by 20th Century Fox Film Corporation, all rights reserved. All rights reserved, including the right to reproduce this book or portion thereof in any form whatsoever. So, I think that this has, full permission for me to actually read this. So, let's get this started, and we'll start. It says, to Lisa Clancy, brilliant in every stitch. Okay, wait a minute. This is a novelization by Richie Tankersley Cusick, which was based on a screenplay by Joss Whedon. So anyways, let's start this, shall we? Prologue. Europe, in the Dark Ages. The stench of death was everywhere. As the weary knight walked his horse slowly through the twilight, he could see that this village, like all the others he had traveled through, had been ravaged mercilessly by the plague. Bodies littered the streets, heaped side by side with rotting animal carcasses, and the gathering darkness echoed with the rumble of death carts and the screams of the dying. The knight kept to the middle of the road, careful to avoid the quarantined houses that had been marked with red crosses, and yet he could sense the frightened, suspicious looks from peasants as they scurried around him. He was relieved when he finally spotted an inn. He handed his horse over to the stable boy and went inside. At first he thought the place was empty, but as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he began to make out several customers drinking silently at their tables. No one spoke to him. Squinting through the gloom, he spotted a dark-haired girl standing lazily behind the bar, and as he stared at her disheveled appearance, she slowly scratched a birthmark on one bare shoulder. A tankard of ale, girl. The knight threw his money into the onto the bar and watched as she drew the ale from a barrel. He drank deeply and stood for a moment considering. So, some plague we're having, huh? His own words echoed around him, ghostly. Finishing his drink, he saw the barmaid pick up a candle and motion him to follow her upstairs. As they reached the doorway of his room, he grabbed her by the hip, surprised when she broke away and continued on down the hall. For a moment he peered after her, but then gave a resigned laugh and closed the door. He didn't see the vampire behind it. He didn't see. Only 2 feet away from him, the skull, hollow eyes, and bloody smile so full of teeth, the peeling gray skin, and yet, as an icy chill went up his spine, the knight slowly began to turn. Oh no! The vampire licked his lips, and then it sprang. Helpless, the knight felt himself being thrust into the center of the room. For 1 second he struggled wildly, then screamed as the vampire buried its face in his neck. Without warning, the door burst open, the lock shattering onto the floor. As the vampire spun around, it saw the barmaid in the doorway, clutching a wooden stake tightly in her hand. Furious, the creature released the knight, who scuttled back, terrified, into the corner. The challengers flew at each other. The barmaid twisted and kicked, and the vampire struck back. Snarling, it came at her again, and as they struggled, it suddenly slipped free and vanished out into the hall. For a long moment, the girl remained still, crouching on the floor, and then, as if slowly coming to a decision, she ran towards the window. The vampire was already out the front door of the inn when it heard the sound of splintering wood. The barmaid came crashing through. The shutters of the overhead window and landed on the creature, ramming the stake straight through its heart. Silence settled heavily around her. The streets were strangely deserted, and then she heard a voice. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Ashes, ashes. It was a strange voice, a giggling voice, and as it floated to her out of the black of night, the girl looked up. All fall down, the voice finished. But it wasn't just one figure forming there in front of her out of the darkness. As the barmaid stared, she could see them now, not just one figure, but 10 or maybe more, all of them vampires, walking slowly towards her along the filthy street. And at the very front was the one who had spoken, a grinning jackal in rotted courier livery, ambling towards her, still giggling as she stood and waited. So focused was she on the vampires approaching that she didn't notice the ones behind her, the one with smooth bone-white skin, the one wearing a long coat, who gently floated up to her and was practically up on her before he spoke. You must forgive my servant, Emmeline. He tends to drool before supper. The barmaid turned. The vampire smiled almost lovingly. Lothos, she whispered. You people will never learn. She swung at him, but he caught her wrist as Emmeline laughed. Lothos grabbed the back of the girl's head and pressed her to him in a tender embrace. We can't be stopped, Lothos murmured. This is our world now. There was only one quick jerk of his hand, and then a jagged flash of lightning, and the barmaid slumped lifelessly in his arms. Outside the castle window, lightning ripped through the night sky, torrents of rain glittering eerily in the brief, flickering light, while the storm raged without a young girl. Raged without. A young girl raged within, arguing hysterically with an old man. I can't. You know you must, the old man said quietly. There is only one now. You are that one. It is time. Why? Why me? The old man shook his head. She has died. You are the next to be called. Why do you think you were sent to me? Trained as you were, you bear the mark. Slowly he pulled the neck of her blouse aside to reveal a birthmark on her shoulder. The mark of the order, he murmured. I don't understand. The old man's voice was solemn. Ever since Adam and Eve first left the garden, he had followed the serpent, the evil one. He sends his legions in the shape of men to feed on us, to breed his hell on our earth. They are a plague upon us. As the girl watched mystified, he unraveled a bundle of cloth and pulled something from it, a wooden stake, long and sharp, and elaborately carved. But as long as there have been vampires, the old man went on, there have been the order, the line of slayers, ones with the strength and the skill to kill them, to find them, where they gather and stop the swell of their numbers. One dies, the next is called. I'm just a girl. You are much more. The old man gave her the stake. To the girl's dismay, she felt the perfect fit of it, the perfect feel of it in her hand. One dies, the old man murmured. The next is called. And as she gripped the stake more tightly, a startling awareness seemed to fill her, and an incredible sense of power rushed through her and overwhelming her. Slowly, the young girl lifted the stake over her head. Chapter 1. Buffy lifted her hand high in the air and gave her pom-pom a shake, following her cue. The other Hemmerly high cheerleaders broke into a rousing yell, and the stands echoed with the screams of enthusiastic students. The Hemmerly versus Seton game, a basketball game rather, was in wild progress. Buffy could see Coach pacing the sidelines, shouting at the players above all the chaos, and she exchanged amused looks with her friend Jennifer and Nicole as the three of them broke into another cheer. Working effortlessly through her routines, Buffy glanced at the scoreboard and then out onto the court. trying to follow the swift maneuvers of the players. The boys seemed to be everywhere all at once. Jeffrey, the forward, Andy, the center forward, Greller, the huge left guard, and as Seaton intercepted a pass and scored 2 points, a massive groan went up from the crowd. Buffy winced, and the players fell back to take the ball out of bounds. "All right, guys, come on," Andy yelled. The referee gave Andy the ball, and the players got into position. Jeffrey looked straight over at Buffy, and she flushed with pride to be Jeffrey's girlfriend. To be Jeffrey's girlfriend was to be the envy of every girl at Hemmerly High, and as she smiled back at him, he gave her that suave wink that never failed to melt her heart. Jeffrey, he's our man. If he can't do it, we don't want it." Buffy revved the cheerleaders up again. The crowd echoed their chants louder and louder. Andy threw the ball in to Thompson, who fed it back. Jeffrey ran in circles till Andy sailed him the ball, and then in one split instant, Jeffrey slammed the ball in for 2 points. The crowd jumped to its feet, crazed with excitement, as the cheerleaders screamed and hugged each other. Buffy did a graceful standing backflip, then straightened up again to see Nicole staring at her with an impressed nod. Buffy brushed her blonde hair from her eyes and gave her friend a giddy smile. "Great game. Now on to some serious shopping," she thought. "Mr. Howard is so heinous. He's always giving me a hard time," Buffy moaned and glanced from side to side at her friends for sympathy. Nicole and Jennifer were intent on window shopping, and Kimberly, who had met them here after the game, was having trouble maneuvering her heavy shopping bags through the crowds. The mall was busy today, noisy and packed with people, and as the girls made their way past the stores, Buffy tried again. I get a C+ on the test, and he tells me, 'You have no sense of history.' I have no sense of history. He wears a brown tie." "You got a C+?" Nicole looked up at last. "I can't believe I cheated off you." Buffy shook her head, disgusted. "Excuse me for not knowing about El Salvador. Like I'm ever going to Spain anyways." "Oh." As they paused outside a store, Buffy pulled a dress from a display rack and held it in front of her. Wouldn't I look just edible and nutritious in this? Guys, that's the stitch." "I'm bored," Kimberly complained as she and Jennifer caught up with the other two. She stopped and stared at Buffy behind the dress. "What do you think?" Buffy asked eagerly. "Please," Kimberly yawned. "It's so 5 minutes ago." "Oh." Face falling, Buffy put the dress back, and Kimberly turned and confronted the rest of the group. "So, what are we doing?" "Why don't we see a movie?" Buffy suggested, brightening. "Well, where?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "Omniplex? No THX." Buffy shook her head. They don't even have Dolby," Nicole reminded them, and Kimberly nodded. "Beverly Center?" "Please," Buffy sighed. "They show previews for foreign movies." "AMC?" Nicole tried. Kimberly and Buffy rolled their eyes. "Bogus corn," Buffy said. Totally stale," Kimberly agreed. "And the ushers are like the Acne Patrol." Nicole spread her arms. "We're thinking Pavilion Stitch?" "Sounds toasty," Buffy said, picking up her shopping bag again. "We're going to Pavilion." "Excellent," Jennifer echoed. Buffy shrugged her shoulders with a quizzical smile. "What's playing there?" She wasn't really paying attention as the strange dark figure came towards her out of the crowd. She only felt a sudden jolt as the man bumped into her and kept on walking without so much as a backward glance. Excuse much?" Buffy called after him. Not rude or anything. He was an older man, about 50-ish, she guessed, and his wrinkled black suit and shirt reminded Buffy of a shabbily dressed priest. "Nice ensemble," Kimberly shouted, and Nicole giggled. "What a bum," Buffy remarked. The girls snickered and kept walking. They didn't see the man suddenly stop and turn to glare after them. His intense expression was slightly worried. His face was haggard, and yet a keen intelligence shone from his eyes. He held himself stiffly arms crossed to his sides, almost as though he expected something to strike at him. He pulled a picture from his coat pocket and looked at it, and then once again stared at the girls. We're to chapter 2. Are your parents really going away for the whole weekend, Nicole asked. Buffy nodded and glanced up at the movie screen. The four of them had been so busy talking ever since they'd sat down in the theater that it suddenly occurred to her that she didn't even know how long the film had been running. That's the plan, she said, smiling. Nicole looked pleased. Good enough. Your parents are always going away for the weekend, Jennifer sighed, taking a long sip of diet soda. You're so lucky. Buffy hesitated. Yeah, I guess. Okay. Make sure I got the right page here. Page numbers are at the bottom. Okay. My mom doesn't go anywhere, Jennifer went on glumly. She even does the cable shopping network. Kimberly leaned closer to Buffy. What did Jeffrey's dad say? Buffy lowered her head, doing her best imitation of Jeffrey's father. Just remember, you're in training, son. Oh, please, Nicole looked at Kimberly, who rolled her eyes in agreement. He is so bald. The girls began to laugh, but then a voice interrupted them from behind. Will you guys shut up, please? The girls turned around in their seats. Two boys were staring at them from a few rows away. One was long and leanly built, with short, spiky hair, his black clothes blending into the darkness around him. The other boy was somewhat stockier. His head was shaved, and he wore suspenders. Both of them had on Doc Martens, propped against the seats in front of them. It could happen, Buffy answered their question, and was immediately bombarded with popcorn. Boo, the tall one scolded. Hiss, the shorter one chimed in. Wrong answer, no prize. Gross, Nicole brushed popcorn off her shoulder. Take a chill lozenge. Like we don't have rights to, Kimberly answered indignantly. Buffy turned back towards the screen. Ignore them. I can't believe these people, the short boy said. We paid money to see this. The tall one looked at him. No, we didn't. Oh, yeah, but I still want to know what happens. Everyone gets horribly killed except the blonde girl in the nightie who finally kills the monster with a machete, but it's not really dead, Buffy said simply. The boy stared at her. You're kidding, Jennifer mumbled. Is that true? Probably, Buffy shrugged. What movie is this? Outside the theater, a fat yellow moon hovered behind the clouds above the parking lot. The night was still stirred only by one long howl. As Jeffrey pulled his BMW convertible into the parking lot, Gruler leaned forward in the back seat, wedging his shoulders between Jeffrey and Andy in the front, tilting back his head. He let out a long, unearthly howl. Excuse me. Howl, then laughed as they climbed out and headed towards the theater entrance. Look at that moon, Gruler pointed. It's huge. Come on, guys, we gotta do something tonight. Party. You know, Andy said, if you spent more time at home sleeping, you'd spend less time on the court screwing up. You were useless out there today, Jeffrey gave Gruler a meaningful glance. Anyway, I'm booked. Gonna spend some quality time with the little woman. Andy and Gruler stopped in their tracks, coughing loudly into their hands. Wimp, wimp. Jeffrey kept on walking. You guys are pathetic. Later for you, then, Gruler said. I'm blowing. Andy, you coming? No, I'll hitch a ride with Jeffrey. Okay, Gruler shrugged. Later. Headbutt. Andy shouted. He and Gruler bent over and brought their foreheads together with painstaking slowness, grimacing but barely tapping heads. Later, Andy said, laughing, and Gruler headed off through the park. The theater had begun to empty out now as Jeffrey watched for Buffy. He noticed two guys coming out the front door, one in a long black coat, the other with a shaved head. He and Andy stared at them suspiciously, and the guy stared back. Then both pairs began to circle each other, their eyes locked until the two punkers finally turned and walked away. Before Jeffrey and Andy could follow, the girls appeared, and Buffy went straight into Jeffrey's arms. For a long moment they stood there, as if they were the only ones in the whole parking lot, smothering each other with kisses. Nice game, Buffy smiled up at Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I don't mean to sound sexist or anything, Andy remarked, staring, but can I borrow her? Andy, Buffy laughed. No way, Jeffrey said. You'd get her dirty. Then, as he saw Buffy's chiding look, he would, honey. He's an animal. Chapter 3. There seemed to be so many shadows tonight. Gruler walked on and on through the park until he found himself in a grassy clearing surrounded by trees. He thought he heard something, a steadily quiet sound, and he stopped at once, his ears straining through the night. He had someone called his name, or had the bushes just rustled in the breeze? He looked around hesitantly. He started forward, then stopped again. Yo, who is that? Don't mess with me, man. I'll rip your head off. No one answered. The silence hung around him, heavy and dangerous. Come on out here, Gruler said, forcing bravado into his voice. Let's see what you got. Something stirred, whispering, hidden. Forget this, he muttered. He turned on his heels, ready to bolt, but there was someone standing behind him. Everyone at school knew Wally Bessel. He was a 9th grade nerd, small for his age and easy to bully, but tonight something seemed different about him. Gruler stared in surprise, taking in Willie's pale face and the strange dead look in his eyes as the kid smiled up at him. Bessel. What are you doing here? Hi, Gruler. What are you grinning at? You think I was scared? Could be. There was a hollow sound to Wally's voice, as if he were speaking mechanically, not even hearing himself talk. You think so? Gruler said angrily. Could be. Gruler grabbed Wally by the collar and hoisted the small boy up in the air. Wally's feet dangled up high above the ground. Listen, you little worm. I could beat your head to a pulp for you, just like I did last year. You got that? You got that? Got that, Wally repeated tonelessly. Good. And then Wally grabbed Gruler's hands. He grabbed Gruler's hands even as he dangled there, and he began to squeeze them, as Gruler's eyes went wide and scared. What the? Wally smiled even more broadly. And then he hissed. He had long fangs, grotesque behind his silver braces. His head dived at Gruler's neck, lightning quick, and as Gruler screamed and screamed, the moon slipped free of the clouds and hung there watching. Chapter 4. The round full moon glowed eerily from the TV screen and out into the darkened living room. Jeffrey sat down on the couch and opened a bag of snacks. He stared for a moment at the original Dracula movie on television, then picked up the remote control and clicked to another channel. The fourth such disappearance in less than 2 months, a local newscaster announced from his desk behind him. A large photograph of a teenage girl smiled frozenly at the camera. The sheriff was not available for comment, but a police spokesman issued a statement saying that the situation is not out of hand. We're going to be late, I knew it. Jeffrey looked up as Buffy's father went into the kitchen with his suitcase. Buffy was at the microwave making popcorn, and she watched silently as her dad plopped his bag down by the door. Irritated, he wandered out again just as Buffy's mother hurried in with her own luggage, talking to Buffy but not looking at her. Now, we'll be back on Sunday. Numbers on the fridge. Don't drive the Jaguar, and tell the maid my underwear does not go in the dishwasher. Before she had even finished talking, Buffy's mother was hurrying out of the kitchen, and Buffy's father was coming back in. Have fun. Be good. Stay away from the Jag. Buffy nodded. I know. He headed out the door as his wife breezed in again. Well, that's everything. Kiss noise. Her, her mother made a kiss noise in Buffy's direction, and Buffy stared back at her. Bye, Buffy said. She shook her head slowly as her mom left, then wandered into the living room where Jeffrey was taking everything in. Bye-bye, Bobby, Buffy's mother called out from the front door. Bye, Jeffrey shouted back. He glanced at Buffy. They think my name is Bobby? Buffy began spraying diet butter substitute on her popcorn. Well, it's possible they think my name's Bobby. Real quality timers, huh? Something like that. Hey, it works for me, Jeffrey grinned. If they want to leave you alone in the house, all helpless and vulnerable. He leaned over to kiss her. Buffy felt his warm, soft breath along her cheek, down her neck. Slyly, she sneaked another handful of popcorn into her mouth. She leaned back by accident into the remote control, and Dracula reappeared suddenly on the TV screen. Jeffrey immediately became engrossed in the movie. Staring at the vampire's face, Buffy let her mind drift. After a few minutes, she dozed off to sleep. It was a filthy place, a squalid room in a dark, dingy building. On the bed sat a young Chinese girl wearing hardly any clothes. She had a birthmark on one bare shoulder. A repulsive sailor was getting dressed, and as he looked at the girl in disgust, he threw some money down on the bed. The bed was littered with popcorn. The girl ran out in the hall, but she came hopelessly to a dead end. Standing there waiting for her was a tall figure with smooth bone-white skin. He smiled at her, and the girl looked up into his face. The girl was Buffy. Soon, Lothos said seductively. Soon. Buffy, hey, what's the sitch? Wake up. Jeffrey held her by the shoulders and shook her as she thrashed and moaned. Gasping, Buffy came to, her eyes slowly focused on Jeffrey's face. Oh, wow, she murmured. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. You were having a nightmare. Jeffrey settled back, his arms around her, already intent again on the television. What did you dream about? He asked, almost as an afterthought. Nothing. Come on, what was it? Nothing, Buffy whispered. It was just a dream. And we're going to pick this up at a later time. Looks like I need to find more bookmarks. But we made it to chapter 5, and I think this is a good place to stop. This book is 183 pages long, and we got to page 27, so I will be doing the math and figuring out how long it will take to do this. But yeah, we've been reading Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It is a novelization by Richie Tankersley Cusick, and it's based on the screenplay by Joss Whedon. And I still can't find a bookmark. Man. Oh well. I'll remember what page it's on. Page 27. Anyways, if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.